I'm very happy. I'm Sue Brantley. I'm very happy to come out of retirement to my first professional Penn State activity is to welcome an alum back, Rens Verburg, and I'm sure I said that very poorly. I actually knew Rens when he was here as a grad student. I came to start my faculty position in 1986. And so I hadn't defended my PhD when I got here, and it wasn't conferred until 1987. So we were kind of like grad students together almost for a little bit of time. And I remember him very, very fondly because when I first got here, one of the grad students, one of the senior grad students who actually was older than I was, said something to me like, "Why did you get this job? You know, you're no better than any of the rest of us here," you know. And he was an American grad student, and then our European grad student here later, not in the same conversation by any means, said to me that he thought I was going to become very much like one of the illustrious faculty here, Hugh Barnes. So I just thought, you know, I remember Rens very fondly for his European suaveness. Anyway, he's had an illustrious career. He's had 35 years of experience now in the mining industry. He got his master's at Utrecht University in the Netherlands in 1986, and then came here and worked here from 86 to 1990, got his PhD. And his PhD advisor was Arnulf Muon, who was one of the illustrious geochemical faculty, and he was also dean for a short period of time. And his PhD is in geochemistry and mineralogy. And then after he left here, he was at Fugard, Nigeria for a year. And then he was a senior geochemist at Hydrometrics, let's see, from 91 to 95. Then he was at Golder Associates from 95 to 2021, where he was the principal geochemist and board director. And then from 2021 to the present, he's the technical fellow in geochemistry and senior vice president for WSP, which is one of the largest engineering and design firms in the world. And I think your offices are in Washington? Yeah. Washington State. So his expertise is in mining and mineral engineering. I think he's worked in every continent where there is mining. I think he hasn't worked in Antarctica, but I looked it up. There's no commercial mining in Antarctica yet. Well, I think there's a global agreement to not have it, and you know, it's like a norm, so we don't break our norms, right? He's the author of numerous studies related to mine water quality and mine issues. He's an expert in acid rock drainage and acid mine drainage and waste management, and also in mine closure. So we're very privileged to have you here and pleased to have you here to talk about critical minerals. Not so fast.
Thanks, Sue. All right, it's on? So, good. Well, yeah, thanks again. It's great to be here. I thought you were going to say I was popular because we had the European Student Organization at the time, and we would serve Heineken at our parties rather than the cheapest beer imaginable. But also, we didn't card, of course, right? As Europeans, the drinking age when I grew up was 16. So to come to a country where it was 21 was, I never really adjusted. So, anyway, yeah, my talk, the critical minerals rush, not so fast. The fast is not so fast. You know, those of you who watch college football, Lee Corso, of course, right? Not so fast, but it's also a bit on the wordplay on one of the federal programs that is meant to accelerate the mining of critical minerals, as we'll see in a little bit. Here we go. So yeah, a bit of an outline. I'll do a very brief introduction yet again to myself and to WSP. It's one of those very large companies that almost nobody has heard of. Then we'll talk about critical minerals, and I'll summarize the issues that, as I see them. Then we look at now what does it take to develop a mine, and what's the regulatory process that's involved. Then more specifically, mineral development in the US. Then we change gears from greenfields to resource recovery from mine waste. I know that some of the faculty here are interested in that. And then how can we promote this recovery? And then last but not least, I want to make a plug for careers in, well, what I call mining geochemistry, but not necessarily even mining geochemistry, any careers in mining can be very exciting, I think, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So the photo you see here is the Mountain Pass mine in the Mojave Desert in California. It's the only operating rare earth mine in the United States right now. The picture at the bottom is, that's the ore. It's a carbonatite deposit. And the sort of the rusty material is the bastnasite, which is the ore mineral. It's a cerium, lanthanum, yttrium phosphate. And just a little anecdote. When I go to mines, I like to take a piece of ore back with me when it's allowed. When you go to a diamond mine, absolutely not allowed. But in this case, it was. And I was given a piece of paper by the Mountain Pass staff, and I said, well, what's on this? And they said, well, when you take this through the X-ray machine at the airport, the whole screen will go completely green. It'll completely blank out and be solid green. So I said, well, that sounds interesting. So I get to the Las Vegas airport. It's in my carry-on luggage, and sure enough, the screen just goes completely green. Well, 24 TSA agents later and 20 times running the mineral through the X-ray machine, I think I made their day. And it was really good that I had that piece of paper. I'd still be there, probably, or locked up by now as somebody who makes X-ray screens go completely green. Oops, sorry. So this is a bit of a personal timeline here. So yeah, Sue already mentioned I'm from the Netherlands. On the picture on the left, it's actually my mother in front of a windmill. That's the town I grew up in, very bucolic. Then you see Utrecht and Penn State, Fugard, Nigeria, where I spent a little bit of time prospecting for barite. Then Hydrometrics, which was owned by Yasarco, a mining company. So that's how I rolled into consulting for mining. Then Golder Associates, and then in 21, the acquisition by WSP. And I want to point out the role that Penn State has played in my career. I ended up at Penn State through Martin Schoenen, who I think a lot of you know. He was a couple of years ahead of me in Utrecht, and he actually made me aware of this program, and he helped with the logistics of getting here. I mean, this was in the days that it was a phone call or a letter. That's how we communicated. So you sent a letter. It took 4 weeks before you had a response, and Martin made sure that the responses indeed came. Then Fugard, Nigeria, I actually got that job through Duff Gold. He connected me with the owner of the barite operation. And then last but not least, it was Scott Mason at Hydrometrics who helped me get the job at Hydrometrics. So especially to the students in the room, be nice to your fellow students, be nice to your faculty, because they can really have an impact on your career. Right, WSP then, very briefly, global footprint. It's a very big company, 73,000, over 60 years of mining experience, and that's because they bought Golder Associates a few years ago. They had no mining to speak of, but we as Golder had been around for 60 plus years, so they bought our expertise. It's if it can be engineered, WSP does it. Ports, railways, underpasses, you name it. And then in mining, we do everything from the very concept to the complete closure and everything in between. So yeah, a very large company, and of those 73,000, about 5,000 are dedicated to mining almost exclusively. And yeah, we do it all over the world, as Sue said. So you can see the distribution of mining-related employees here. And as she also mentioned, I have worked on every continent extensively except Antarctica, and I'm not so sure mining is never going to happen there. I think if it's up to the Chinese, they'll be out there if nobody stops them. Right, critical minerals. So this is my summary of issues, and I want to thank Ned Mamula, who started off this series, because I borrowed some of his slides. He was, his thoughts. He was very gracious about that. So why do we need critical minerals? And I'm going to assume that in this audience, everybody knows what a critical mineral is. So, we almost completely rely on imports, now frequently from what Ned called unfriendly nations, what our administration calls an unreliable country, as you can see in the picture on the left there. So they have about 70% of the world's supply of rare earths. They control 90% of the processing. So, when a country like Australia comes up with rare earths, they have to send it to China and then buy it back. Now, critical mineral exploration and production is not really important to China. It's a very small percentage of their gross domestic product, which means that they can use it for strategic purposes, and they do. They squeeze the production. They flood the market sometimes, which of course would make production in other parts of the world unprofitable. And the Chinese are also, they play the long game as opposed to what I would argue is the case in the US. In the US, every 4 years, we see fairly dramatic changes as we've experienced the last 12 years or so. Not the Chinese, they have the long game in mind, and they're willing to accept short-term deficiencies to achieve those long-term goals. We have lots of allies around the world that do a little bit of rare earth mining, but yeah, they need their own. So to get it from them is not the easiest. So our stockpiles are the lowest as they've been in history right now, and that does represent a threat to our economy, manufacturing, defense, and security. And the longer this goes on, the more intense this threat becomes. Okay, so a lot is being done. There's a lot of very positive development here. Executive orders, first of all, you see on the top right, one of the covers of one of those executive orders. Bilateral agreements with a whole host of countries. Most recent one being Australia, $8.5 billion. Other countries are Japan, UK, India, Ukraine, of course, although the Ukraine agreement comes with a certain number of stipulations. Federal investment in R&D is going on. I think about $1 billion has been set aside, but I understand from talking to you this morning that it's not trickling down to Penn State necessarily, not yet, perhaps. Direct investment in mining operations. On the bottom right, you see an example there in the Trilogy Metals Alaskan project, direct federal investment. You and I are 18% owners of Mountain Pass, the mine I mentioned earlier as taxpayers. The feds own 18%. And then there is permitting assistance, and that's where that FAST comes in. I have to look this up. It's called Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. So it's been around since 2015, but mining projects, 31 of them to date, have been recently incorporated. And then on the bottom left, you see what that website looks like when you look up a mining project, in this case, the South 32 Hermosa Critical Minerals project in Arizona. So all positive developments, certainly aimed at boosting our critical mineral development in the United States. But as you can probably tell from my title, not so fast. This is a quote from the president. Quite recently, he met with the Australian Prime Minister, again, $8.5 billion agreement. But the statement that I highlighted there, I hate to disappoint you, but that ain't gonna happen. Australia is actually a perfect example. I mean, the agreement is very thin on details. It's just, it's not a blank check necessarily, but there doesn't appear to be much depth to the agreement. And Australia currently barely produces rare earths, and they have, in essence, no processing capability. So they are where we are. So what this investment is going to do in the immediate and long term, I think the jury is still out on that. So what does it take to develop a mine? Well, first of all, it takes a lot of time. The average timeline from exploration to production is 14 years. Of course, some mines go quicker, some go slower, but 14 years is a reasonable average. It's expensive. Average development cost is about $1 billion. So not something you do overnight. And why is that? Well, it's a hugely complicated facility, a mine. On the cartoon on the left, you see some of the components of a mine. You got it's usually either open pit mining or underground mining through a head frame. Then depending on the ore type, you need a mill, you need to crush it, you need to process it. Some ore types can be leached in situ through a heap leach. And of course, there are the waste products, massive amounts. I mean, 99% of what goes in the mill comes out as tailings. And then the rock that is not economic becomes waste rock, and the amounts are quite staggering. Mines operate these days according to this, what they call safe and stable motto. So everything they do has to be geotechnically stable. No dams can't fall down, waste rock dumps can't fall down, and has to be environmentally stable. So that when you think of the quantities involved with mining, that is quite challenging from an engineering and other perspective. Mines are often at a very remote location. which doesn't make it easy. Requires significant infrastructure. A lot of mines generate their own power. Then, of course, the fuel has to get there. Transportation, ports, railways, roads can be very, very costly, very, very long. And in the US in particular, we're an expensive country to do business in. Capital costs are high, operational costs are high, wages are high. I mean, when you compare that to many other places in the rest of the world, we're one of the most expensive places to do business. So this cartoon looks very nice and clean. If only mining were like that. This is what some of it looks like in reality. On the top left, it's a tailings facility in Mexico that I've worked on. 6 square miles. That's a lot of waste. You can see it's completely surrounded by a dam. It's a very high dam. So again, the engineering that comes into play to make a facility like this safe is significant. Top right is the Bingham Pit near Salt Lake City, Kennecott Utah Copper. I think it's still the largest man-made hole in the world. It's about a mile deep and almost 3 miles across. You can see these are haul trucks here. Just to give you a sense of scale, they can move about 300 tons each. They're absolutely massive. The tires are taller than I am. So yeah, it's an enormous facility. They move about 500,000 tons a day. When you think of an average dump truck on the road, it holds about 20 tons, so 25,000 dump trucks of material per day. So the logistics of an operation like that are just mind-boggling. Waste rock then at the bottom right, you can see that these waste rock piles, they rival the natural topography, sometimes billions of tons. And then I talked about transportation a little bit. So a couple of examples that I'm personally familiar with. In the middle bottom is that's the road to the Brucejack Newmont's operation in interior British Columbia. It's a gold mine. And you get there across a glacier. You spend about an hour driving on a glacier. That's the only way by road that you can get there. The alternative is helicopter. And yeah, as we all know, glaciers are receding. So they're having a hell of a time just making the logistics work, essentially of connecting the glacier road to the rock road, if you will. Every year they have to re-engineer something because the glacier just keeps pulling back, and there's going to be a point that they can't make it work anymore. That simply won't be able to get there by road. On the bottom left, that's at the Yellowknife Airport in the Northwest Territories. This is what you use to get up to the diamond mines in the Canadian Arctic. They have short runways, they're gravel. So the DC-3 is that's the biggest plane that can get there. Jets can't actually land there. If you like flying, it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's like stepping back in time. The things are noisy, they rattle, they groan, there's oil flying everywhere, but you really get a sense of flying. If you don't fly there, then there are the ice roads, but they only operate in wintertime. And as we all know, winters are getting shorter in the Arctic. So transportation with mining can be a challenge. And then, of course, the environmental aspects of mining. They don't go unnoticed. Top left there, that's in New Caledonia. That's a French territory north of New Zealand. It's a photo I took. Inco was the mining company I was working for at the time, looking at nickel laterites. So it says there in French, Inco is a polluter and a pillager. And we actually weren't allowed to drive around in cars that had the company logo on it, for fear of being accosted by the locals. Then top right, bottom left are from the Seattle Times. As you can see, the bottom left is probably what a lot of people think of mining. Lots of dust, lots of stuff going on. And then in the middle is from the National Geographic, actually. That's what brown coal mining in Germany looks like. Brown coal, of course, not a strategic mineral, but people see these types of pictures, and the image of mining, it doesn't help the image of the mining industry when you see something like that. So that's something we have to deal with as well. Not unique to critical minerals, certainly, but an aspect of mining that cannot be overlooked. All right, a mine then, the timeline. I already mentioned about 14 years on average, and here's a timeline, no scale at the bottom. Versus labor activity on the vertical axis. And you can see exploration 1 to 10 years, then site design and construction 1 to 5 years. That's the period over which the permitting takes place typically. Then operation, now if you're lucky, 100 years. If you've done something wrong, 2 years, then you have a lot less ore than you imagined. and then closure and decommissioning, and then post-closure, sometimes into perpetuity. For instance, when water treatment is required forever. So let's look a little bit more at this site design and construction period where permitting takes place. Now, I don't expect you to be able to see the bottom text all that much. I just want to give you an idea what happens during those 5 years. There's an enormous amount of engineering going on to get a mine off the ground, and it's during that period that the regulators come into play as well. I've highlighted that in yellow on the slide. So the point I'm trying to make here is that, you know, even if the regulatory process slows things down, this still needs to happen, no matter what the regulatory climate is. And there's really very little opportunity to condense this period. The engineering just has to take its course. I mean, the stakes are extremely high, and it's a lot needs to be done in a relatively short amount of time, as you can see from this picture. This is actually from one of the world's major mining companies. Then, the regulatory process, I've already hinted at it. It's often used as a scapegoat right now, especially the current administration. Anything that has to do with regulations is seen as a negative. But how does the US compare to the rest of the world? And I would argue, based on my experience, that it's quite similar to especially other developed countries like Canada and Australia, where mining is quite active. It's quite similar between states in terms of regulations, and there's also no immediate correlation between the regulatory burden and mining attractive investment, as I'll show you on the next few slides. What you see here at the bottom, again, you can't read it, but it's from a mine in the Northern Territories in Australia. It lists 29 statutory requirements and 14 voluntary requirements that the mine has undertaken. I've blacked out the information that would allow you to identify this particular mine, but this goes to show that, you know, sometimes the cases things are so much easier in Australia. Well, no, as you can see from this, these are all annual reporting requirements. And the voluntary requirements, most mining companies undertake those. The International Cyanide Code, Global Industry Standard on Tailings Management, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. All major mining companies have signed up for them. They all come with reporting requirements, and they all come with requirements in terms of governing your operation and managing your operation. So there's a lot of voluntary internal control going on at mining operations. So this attractiveness, before we go there, this gives you an idea of what the main risks are for mining based on a questionnaire that EY sent out to the mining companies. So the top risk on the left is operational complexity, and we'll dive into the detail a little bit later then. And that's a new risk for this year relative to last year. Rising costs and should be reduced productivity. That risk is increasing over time. Capital, the risk has actually been decreasing, especially the gold miners. They're flush with money. The government is investing, so there's actually a lot of money available right now for mining. Resources and reserves, they're about the same as last year. The license to operate, another way, the societal acceptance of mining is fairly stable. The workforce is a new risk. There's a chronic shortage of people working in the mining industry and working in companies that work for the mining industry, like my own. And then geopolitics, that risk has actually gone down. I was surprised to see that. I would think that with the current volatility in politics, it would have gone up. But the mining industry is quite used to working all over the world, you know, in countries where coups happen and there's social unrest. So they actually don't see the current climate as being particularly volatile. Digital and innovation, that just keeps getting bigger, and then some sustainability and changing business model. So when you look at operational complexity, what are the most important bottlenecks? And at the top, there is the regulatory compliance delays at 31%. But then immediately below that, you see this labor issue again. You see processing plant capacity again. You see the transportation logistics. You see material handling inefficiency. So again, I would make the point that let's say we can, fix the regulatory compliance issue. Number two is still labor availability. Number 3 is processing plant capacity. So fixing the regulatory environment alone is not going to help us get to critical minerals overnight. I talked about the investment attractive index a little bit. This is a combination of, let me make sure I get my language right, of the mineral potential index, which is just the geology, if you will, and the policy perception index, weighted 60 and 40% respectively. And the policy perception index, of course, has a lot to do with the regulatory climate. So this is again based on an annual survey of mining companies. Now you can't see quite the top, but at the top we have Utah. So that's the globally that's the best place to invest in mining right now, according to the mining companies. Number 2 is Nevada. Then you see some Canada and Australia. Then Arizona, again Canada and Australia, Alaska, Montana. So the US is doing very, very well from an investment attractiveness perspective. Really, really well. California, I highlighted it near the bottom on the the left-hand graph there. The geology is fantastic, but the regulatory climate in California, not surprisingly, is a little challenging. At the far, far bottom, we see China, very far to the bottom, only outranked, if you will, by Niger. So nobody is looking to go to China anytime soon, at least from the Western world. You're going to see some photos of me throughout this presentation. It's not because I like to see myself on the big screen necessarily, but I want to do a bit of advertising, frankly, for the mining industry, especially to students. It's a phenomenal industry to work in. It's very exciting. They can use people with many, many different backgrounds. So I'm hoping that by showing some photos of some of the places I've been, that maybe a student or two have some appetite to start thinking about mining as a career, or mining consulting, or environmental law, or social outreach. I mean, all of these aspects are part of operating a mine. So this is a photo that was taken in Fiji. I was looking at core. Right, I mentioned that this attractiveness index is a combination of mineral potential and policy perception. So on the left we have the geology. Again, you see Nevada, Utah being very highly ranked. Canada and Australia are in there, Arizona, Montana. And that's not surprising, of course. I mean, Alaska's in there too. We're basically looking at the Cordillera, which Ned Mamula also mentioned, right? It's one of the richest metallogenetic provinces in the world. And yeah, we're just blessed with a huge amount of mineral potential. Then what about the regulations? Well, those same states show up near the top again. Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Wyoming. This is again globally. So we're doing pretty well from a policy perception index as well. The regulatory climate is not as bad as many people make it out to be. California, of course, way at the bottom again, at the right-hand column this time. And China, not quite the bottom, but made it very, very close to the bottom. I have a personal anecdote there as well. I was doing work for in China for a Canadian company. We were trying to get a gold mine going in Liaoning province near the border with North Korea. And we did everything that you need to do. I mean, I as a geochemist, I collected my samples, had them analyzed, wrote a nice big report. The engineering was going on, everything. A few years of work, everything seemed to be going just fine. And then it was time to start constructing, and the company needed a construction permit. And that permit was never issued by the Chinese government. And I know the Canadian company tried through legal ways, waiting, but after a few years, they gave up and walked away. And the moment they walked away, the Chinese walked in and basically took the Canadian design and started building. And that's unfortunately the reality of working in China. So it's no wonder that Western companies are not particularly interested in going there. And it's also, I think, a reason why we want to be independent from China in terms of our critical minerals as much as we can. Okay, so why do we have limited mineral development in the US? Well, first of all, these are some personal impressions, but also based on lots of conversation with lots of other people. US is a very litigious company, by far the most litigious company in the world, which of course doesn't help. NIMBYism, not a uniquely American issue, I would think, but we're near the top there as well. In other parts of the world, there's more a sense of what's best for the common good, I would say, than is the case in the US. I already mentioned the US is quite expensive. There's no stable national mineral policy. There's a lot of countries have this sort of policy that is based on foresight, if you will. 10, 15, 20 years from now, we want to be here. In the US, that's just not available. There's no US Bureau of Mines anymore. That got founded in 1910, but was abolished in 96 for cost-cutting measures. And that means there's also no single organization anymore in the US looking after mining. There's no what I would call a bridging organization, and I'm using this MEND program in Canada as an example, the Mine Environmental Neutral Drainage program. It's been around for quite a while, and it's a committee or an organization that has all stakeholders in it that have anything to do with mining. So yeah, that builds a lot of goodwill. It builds a lot of consultation, collaboration, and it provides a very nice starting point for when, for instance, you're interested in developing a mine. That organization also supports research, promotes mining, public outreach. So this is something that's in essence, it doesn't exist here. They have it in Australia, they have it in Europe, but not in the US. Cultural awareness. When I travel abroad and I go to Canada, I go to Australia, and I'm at passport control. What are you doing in the country? Well, I'm going to visit a mine. Oh, that's great. My cousin works there. That's not the case in the US. I mean, you get a blank stare. The mining as an industry is just not ingrained in the American psyche the way it is in the Canadian psyche or the Australian psyche or in Africa or South America. And perhaps part of it is that there's just not much education in earth sciences below the university level. I mean, how are people supposed to get exposed to earth sciences in the US at a young age? And if it can be grown, it must be mined. I have yet to find an exception to that. So I personally would like to see a lot more emphasis on earth sciences in high school in particular. The image of the mining and the mineral processing industry I already talked about, and that of course can affect your social license to operate. That's not something that should be underestimated, the social license. A good example is the nuclear industry in Germany. I mean, it lost its social license to operate, and as a result, Germany decided not to have nuclear energy anymore. Of course, they're seriously ruining the day that they made that decision, but it's an example of how society as a whole can basically kill an industry. And then there's the regulatory climate again. I keep coming back to that. I mentioned the policies are generally the same, but relationships are sometimes more adversarial in the US. When I meet with regulators in Canada, Australia, or Utah and Nevada for that matter, their attitude is, well, how can we help you? California, no, there are all kinds of problems, all kinds of barriers are immediately thrown up. So even though the policies are generally the same, I'd say the attitude can vary quite a bit. There aren't enough regulators in the US regulatory environment. They don't have enough to take care of all the decisions they need to make. And frankly, I've also had my doubts about the capabilities of some of the regulators. They're just not properly educated to make the decisions that they need to make. And those are some very, very significant decisions at time. And of course, some of them know that, and they're afraid to make those decisions, and then what do? Then you say, well, no, I need 100 more samples there, and I need another 3 years of monitoring there. That's typically the regulators' answer to uncertainty. I already mentioned that global mining companies operate according to their corporate policies anyway, regardless of location. Whether I work on a project in Ghana or in the US, I collect the same number of samples, do the same number of tests, write the same report. There's absolutely no difference. And in many cases, the global mining companies have more stringent internal controls than the regulators do. Good example is when I work in Peru. Peru doesn't have a water quality standard for molybdenum for some reason. Now, when I work for Newmont in Peru, they have an internal molybdenum water quality standard that they operate by. So self-imposed controls, if you will. And I already mentioned that, the level of effort in terms of due diligence is really the same regardless of where you are in the world. All right, we've talked about greenfields now, so let's look at resource recovery from mine waste products a little bit. There's an increasing emphasis on that. Some people even say you shouldn't call mine waste products anymore. They're resources. That's how we should look at them. Lots of countries and some continents are working on national efforts to make this happen. And of course, there are lots of benefits to it. It's consistent with our modern thinking of a circular economy, sustainability principles. It reduces the long-term impacts. I mean, you go to a tailings impoundment, you take out the copper that is left, you're left with a cleaner material, which means that your closure requirements could be less stringent. You may have created a beneficial material in the process that you can use for other purposes. And then, of course, it would benefit the reputation of the mining companies as well. On the top right, you see a colleague of mine, Devin Castendijk from our Denver office. He's looking at recovering metals from pit lakes. He's a pit lake expert, and that's nothing new. The Berkeley pit near Butte, Montana, they're actually recovering copper through a cementation process from the pit lake. The pit lake itself has become an ore deposit for all practical purposes, and it's a gift that keeps on giving because the copper keeps being released through sulfide oxidation. So we're going to be out there for quite a while recovering copper. Bottom right, you see this is the Golden Sunlight mine in Montana. This is the governor of Montana and the CEO of Barrick with their golden shovels. They started the recovery product where they're taking old tailings and recovering gold and sulfur. So the gold makes the money. Taking the sulfur out results in a waste product that's a lot more environmentally benign. So that's the basis for that activity. It's nothing new, resource recovery. The photo on the left I took in southern Spain in the Iberian Peninsula. The portal that you see there has been issuing acid rock drainage for over 2,000 years. The interior of the portal is from the Roman era. And we know from archaeological investigations that the Romans used sheepskin to recover gold. Jason and the Golden Fleece, that's the origin of that myth. And they also used scrap iron to recover copper. So for more than 2,000 years, people have already used mine wastes for recovery. On the right, you see a picture from Agricola on the nature of metals from the 16th century. He also talks about recovery of metals from waste products. And he also talks about environmental pollution. As a matter of fact, you see here the trees that have been cut for fuel. So he already makes the point that mining is not good for the environment. Then he also makes the point that we need metal for all kinds of purposes, including for the torture of prisoners. That was high on his list of uses of metals for some reason. Okay, so how do the metals in mine wastes in the US compare to our demand, to our consumption? So there's a graph, you see 4 metals, several critical minerals there, and the blue dots show the annual consumption of those critical minerals. The green dots show how much metal was available in mine wastes between 98 and 2021. This comes from the TRI, the Toxics Release Inventory. Mines are supposed to, on an annual basis, determine how much metal they have in their mine waste, and given the volumes that are associated with mine waste, those amounts are significant. And then the blue bars are the same, but then for 2021. So you could see that, if we were serious about extracting metals from a mine waste, we might be able to meet the annual demand. Now, this does not take into account the financials associated with recovery. This is strictly based on how much do we need, how much is there, and unfortunately, it is all about the dollars at the end of the world, at the end of the day. So that's why, in reality, we see very little of this going on. It's just not economically viable, apart from the technical challenges that we still have. So some advantages and challenges related to the recovery of critical minerals from mining waste, and you see a number of potential sources there. In green, I highlighted which I think are the most promising mine waste, and in yellow is the next set, and then without color is yet the third tier, if you will. Tailings, I think, should be our biggest focus. They have already been crushed and ground, which is a huge energy consumption, a lot of cost associated with that, so we don't have to do that work anymore. And often they're located in areas where infrastructure already exists, so that would be an obvious place to go. Then second on my list would be AMD discharge and sludge, and I know some people here are looking into that. It's direct extraction, and it has all kinds of environmental benefits, of course, as well. Both bauxite residues and coal ash, the volumes are absolutely gigantuan, unbelievably large. So there is the potential for removing large amounts of metals, but unfortunately nobody has been able to make it work. But that's that's where we need the technology to make that happen, because I mean the size of those deposits is just absolutely mind-boggling. The reference there is Anne Meest, colleague or somebody who works for a competitor of mine, but it's a very interesting article if you ever want to get a better handle on what can be done in terms of recovery of critical minerals from mining wastes. So what's happening actually? Well, unfortunately, not a lot. There's a lot of activity on the front end. No inventorying of mining wastes. Top right, you see what the USGS is doing. They have this Earth MRI initiative, and it's a wonderful website, very interesting to go to. Then characterization, we collect the tailings, we collect the slag, we collect the waste rock, and I analyze them for rare earths or what have you. Then a lot of work going on in terms of how do we get those metals out. That's really one of the biggest bottlenecks right now. And then of course there needs to be the valuation aspect. Is it economically viable? So despite all this attention and arguably 2,000 years of looking at this, I could only come up with 6 projects around the world where this is happening on an operational scale. So that's a little disappointing, I would say. I already mentioned the Golden Sunlight Mine. Rio Tinto Kennecott, they use cementation as well. They collect acid rock drainage from the toes of their waste rock facilities and precipitate copper. And then, a few other projects, 2 in Africa, or 3 in Africa, 1 in Australia. So, this shows that despite all the goodwill, all the interest, all the money that potentially can be made, there are some significant hurdles yet to overcome. And as you'll see later, I think Penn State can really play a role in that. Most of the recovery from mining waste is actually done by what we call ASMs, artisanal and small-scale miners. You see that on the bottom right. This is in Papua, Indonesia. I'm standing on the tailings deposit of the Grasberg mine, one of the largest mines in the world, copper and gold. And they have on that tailings deposit, there are about 10,000 fellows just like this, eking out the last bit of gold using, a very traditional method of gold winning. In this case, it's actually condoned by the mining company, and they try to help the people that do this. I mean, there are villages on the tailings impoundment. There's a whole industry around it. But when you go to places like Brazil or Suriname, where the same thing is happening, but with the use of cyanide in the Amazon, it's just absolutely devastating. It's horrific, and not just for the environment, but the miners themselves, they sit there burning off the mercury. So it's very sad, and the problem is only getting bigger as those countries get poorer. More people are drawn to what they perceive to be the easy money, and it's anything but easy, but it's easier than most other things in countries like that. So that's a significant challenge globally. So current situation, a little bit of a summary. So I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. I think there's a lot of positive developments when it comes to critical minerals. But the fact does remain that remining or mining comes with risks and potential adverse effects to human health and the environment. Now, fortunately, in the US, the framework is in place to ideally prevent that. And if we can't prevent it, to minimize or mitigate it. And I don't think we should be taking any shortcuts. I mean, we can't allow ourselves to become like Russia or China. And I have two personal examples there. Top right is in Eastern Germany. This is the Wismut mine, the facade of the main building. And this mine was operated by the Soviets. And in typical Soviet art, right, you see the happy, healthy worker smiling all the way to his his commune, I guess. But the reality was far from that. The mine was called Wismuth, which is bismuth in German, but what they were mining was uranium. And they weren't told they were mining uranium. So let's just say that the epidemiology related to radioactive diseases took a big leap because of what happened at that mine. All kinds of horrible medical situations that were studied, but at the expense of the workers. In the middle, we see a dam breach in Zambia near Kitwe. This is a mine that's operated by the Chinese, and there's a lot of Chinese mining going on in Africa. And based on personal experience as well, let's just say that the environment isn't as important to the Chinese as it is to us. So the maintenance isn't there of the facilities. The workers aren't being treated very well. I saw a Chinese operation in the Congo where they were going after cobalt, and I couldn't get close, of course, but the place, it basically looked like a concentration camp with guard towers, big fences around it. And I was told there are about 4,000 Chinese in there that are doing their thing. And when the cobalt is gone, they'll just, overnight, they'll all be gone. And the Congo is left with an environmental legacy that they're incapable of dealing with. So, shortcuts, that's not the way to go. We need to, when we do it, we need to do it right. We're dealing with new commodities, especially rare earths, that we don't really understand fully in terms of environmental behavior. The fate and transport, the bioavailability, bioaccumulation, toxicity. And it reminds me of when I started working in the mid-90s and we were dealing with cobalt. The bottom right picture is the Blackbird mine in Idaho. It was the only operating cobalt mine at the time, and I was part of the team that helped clean it up. A very pretty creek, as you can see, but as you can also imagine, nothing was alive in that particular creek. So we were tasked with remediating it, and we started looking into the cobalt literature, and there wasn't any. I mean, so it was both frustrating and exciting. I mean, we had to develop thermodynamic constants for our modeling. We did absorption testing, also for our fate and transport modeling. All kinds of studies were done with fish and pigs and what have you to look at bioaccumulation. And I think, and we got it done. I mean, now cobalt is routine in terms of how we approach it. But I think that's about where we are with regard to the rare earths. They're not very well understood, they're not very well studied, and we need to know a lot more about them in order to understand their short-term and long-term impacts. Then it's not just the rare earths, but you go to Mountain Pass, for instance, thorium, radium, lead are important byproducts, involuntary byproducts, but they're in the environment, so you need to look out for those as well. And then last but not least, there simply aren't enough people to look into all of this, neither in the mining companies themselves or in the organizations that service the mining industry. All right, so what can we do to improve the situation? So this is the same list of issues that I identified earlier, and here are, well, some of them are my answers, some of them I don't know what to do. Litigation and NIMBYism, I mean, it's a cultural thing in the US, I think. So if anybody has any idea how to fix that, I'd like to know. Expensive, money is there, as I mentioned already, tax breaks, subsidies, direct investment, workforce training, that's being done. But regardless of that, it'll always be a commercial enterprise, unless the government at some point simply starts saying, no, you can operate at a loss, we'll subsidize you. But as long as money needs to be made, that's going to be a significant barrier on operating some of these critical minerals facilities. The national mineral policy, I think we need to establish it. The Bureau of Mines should come back. Actually, the mining industries, they'd really like to see the Bureau of Mines back. They felt that life was much better when there was a single federal organization looking after them. That bridging organization, I think, be a good idea. And then the cultural awareness, we just need to educate the public better. The mining industry needs to do its part. And we need to explain what's the value of mining and minerals. And this is one of many, many pictures that you can use for that purpose, right? What does it take to make a smartphone? There's a YouTube video about a family sitting in a living room, and then the video says, what happens when mining would disappear? And one by one, everything in the room disappears until they sit there in their underwear, and that's about the reality, right? Without mining, we certainly wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be standing here. It's an essential industry. So a lack of education in earth sciences, yeah, we need to promote that. We do need more professionals. We need students to be more aware of career opportunities. We need more on-the-job training. We need our educational institutions to do a better job. The image, yeah, there'll always be a bias against mining, I think, but I think there probably are ways we can improve that image. The regulatory climate, certainly streamlining. I mean, I'm all for it, but that needs to be done by sufficient staff and staff that is qualified and has the right attitude. They need to understand that they're there to support development rather than obstruct it. Now, I had an interesting conversation with an ex-litigator, regulator, and he said that some in the regulatory community are concerned about this streamlining because by the public that might be interpreted as shortcuts, which makes them more exposed to litigation, which in turn then might make a regulator more hesitant to make a decision. So yeah, a bit of a paradox here. So we'll have to see how in reality that's going to shake out. And then the R&D, I talked about that already. I think we're fine on the exploration, and we know how to find these things, but it's the extraction, the processing, and the environmental behavior that of the rare earths in particular that need a lot more work. All right, then I wanted to shift gears a little bit to this career aspect of my talk. And it shouldn't really say careers in mining geochemistry. It should just be careers in mining, associated with mining, what have you. So what do we have in the US? We see declining enrollment among students. Just a few numbers, 536 degrees in 2016, 327 in 2020, and then China, 5,000. Declining offerings, the mining programs are disappearing in the US. You see the numbers there. Bottom right is Nebraska, not so long ago, a couple months ago, they made this announcement. I don't know what's happened since, but yeah, it's not a good sign, of course. I must admit that in my 30 years of interviewing candidates, I've seen a decline in foundational knowledge. And what I would call foundational knowledge is the thermodynamics, the mineral chemistry, physical chemistry, mineralogy, petrology, just the building blocks. We do a lot of modeling these days, and that's great. But the models are so, well, I mean, you can actually tell ChatGPT nowadays to write an input file, and it does it perfectly well. But the problem, of course, is, garbage in, garbage out. I've seen model results that of a pit lake that had minerals precipitating that only occur on the moon. It's a model will tell you, yeah, these 500 minerals can precipitate. It's my job to figure out which one or two are the realistic ones. And that's unfortunately where I find students these days lacking. We need to be able to evaluate our thermodynamic databases. Are the data reliable? How are they derived? A lot of current candidates, they look at a thermodynamic database, they really don't know what they're looking at. So I think there's room for improvement in terms of that aspect of earth sciences education. And there's the number of mining practitioners retiring by 2029, 200,000. So that's a very, very significant proportion of the mining industry. It's really a graying industry. It's a graying industry on my end too, which is, yeah, it's great for me. I mean, I'll be working until I can no longer get out of bed, I guess, but it's not the future of the industry. So I did a little informal poll amongst my colleagues, a very small sampling, only 10 or so, prompted by discussions with the Acid Drainage Technology Initiative, which is what I'm a member of. It's the closest to that bridging organization in Canada that I mentioned, but we're all volunteers, so not a lot happening. The Geosciences Alumni Board, I became a recent member, and we've had some really good discussions around this. And then in talking to colleagues, clients, competitors, regulators, everybody is really afraid of the mining industry falling off the cliff because of a lack of practitioners. So here's my poll. This was my first question. What topics do you feel were missing or insufficiently taught in college relative to your current job? And then in red, I've highlighted the most common answers. In yellow, the next set. So you see ore deposits, economic geology, coding, interestingly enough. And then in yellow, you see a a bunch of disciplines that my colleagues, who are very, very smart people from very reputable institutions, wish they had known more of when they hit the professional life. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of everything, you know, not just technical, but presentation skills, technical writing, field methods. Without exception, they feel they haven't spent enough time in the field, and we see that as practitioners as well. We have to go out in the field and train them, which is fine. I mean, that's part of my job too. But the need for that training has significantly increased since I got started 35 years ago. So that's me on the right there, actually, you know, in the field, very, very young, somewhere in Arizona, teaching a particular technique. And then on the left, we in first in Golden, then in WSP, we do a lot of internal education, and we have to, just to bring our new colleagues up to speed on yeah, what's going on, how to go about our practice. So we like to get together as the global geochemistry group when we can, usually in the context of big international conferences. So this was a meeting we held in Santiago, Chile, and we educate ourselves and each other. Next question was, how did you decide on a career in mining consulting? Again, it was a coincidence, was the most common answer. And two of my colleagues say, I still don't know how I ended up there. So out of the, it's both funny and not so funny, right? Clearly we need to get to students earlier and help them shape their career rather than hoping that they sort of roll into it. I'm the one at the very, actually, I'm the one, my hobby became my profession. So this the one answer, but that's the exception rather than the norm, I think. I started collecting rocks when I was about 6 or 7 years old and never looked back really, and I still do. And then on the right, you see my first course book in college, and I thought that was a pretty intriguing cover page as well. So I said, yeah, let's go see what geochemistry has to offer. But yeah, the message here is that we just need to get to future practitioners much sooner than is now the case. When did you decide on a career in mining consulting? Well, again, in college or after having entered the job market? Way too late. I mean, they need to, I'm the one that's before high school, again, the lone exception, but we got to do better than that. We need people that now feel a passion for this type of work much earlier in their life rather than deciding at the last minute. So a couple of photos on the right to entice, again, the students in this room. This is me in both cases. Top is Panama, the rainforest. I was doing water quality sampling. It's rainforest, so the only places you can land is the riverbeds. You get out and you make sure there are no jaguars and big snakes, and then you collect your samples. That was a very, very cool field program. At the bottom, I'm at the border of Chile and Argentina in the Andes. I'm at 17,000 feet. I'm absolutely miserable. I've just flown up there in a matter of a couple of hours, and if any of you have ever been at altitude, I didn't know what was up or down at that time when the photo was taken, but it turned out to be a very exciting field program with condors flying overhead and things like that. But yeah, these are the kinds of locations you get to visit in my line of work. So there aren't too many adventurous jobs out there anymore, but I'd like to think that I still have one of those. Then last but not least, how can we make people more aware of a career mining or mining consultant? So in-person guest lectures by practitioners, they really like to hear from people in the field, and then in-person educational outreach from professional and industry organizations. And you'll recognize a few: AGU, GSA, National Mining Association, MEN, that's a Canadian project, SME. So that, by my colleagues, again, a very, very small sampling, but I think a fairly representative sampling of what they would have liked to have seen when they were in high school or in college. And again, a photo of me. This is earlier this year in Portugal, where I'm talking to students of a local university about mining. All right, in closing then, so I think there's a lot good stuff going on. I think there are significant positive developments in our quest for critical minerals, but there's always the but. What's happening is not the end all and be all. More work is needed. Extraction, processing, environmental behavior, first and foremost. And I really do think that, of course, I'm Penn State proud, but even if I weren't Penn State proud, I'd say Penn State is uniquely positioned to play a key role. On the top, you see how we rank in terms of our earth sciences. I mean, that's something to indeed be very proud of. It's I don't think there are many schools that can match this. So I think we have all the building blocks in place here. The faculty, we attract good students, we have the equipment, we have the will, I think, in talking to some of you this morning. So we really should be at the forefront of this critical minerals initiative. And yeah, it truly, there are just a ton of career opportunities in a very exciting field. And I'll leave you again with a photo of me grinning. Again, this is Peru, again, very high, but yeah, it's just phenomenal, some of the places that I've been able to visit as part of my career, and those places are still out there and waiting for practitioners that hopefully Penn State will educate. And then I'll end with this. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the organizers of the talk series, thank Penn State and WSP for the support they've given me. And who says mining can't be beautiful? This is the sun rising over a tailings impoundment. So thank you for your attention.
And you mentioned my friend Martin Schoenen. I didn't realize that you're here because he's another Dutchman.
Yep.
He's actually been promoted to the acting assistant director at Brookhaven National Lab.
Mm-hmm.
There may be another qualifier, maybe it's the scientific part of that or something, but anyway, he's way up there. So we're benefiting from the Dutch students that have come here. In honor of that, this is the microphone. I'm going to ask for questions, and hopefully we'll get a question so that I can throw it along the lines of the Dutch game.
So if you go to South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
Canada, Australia, you know, mining has always been a really important part of their economies. It's not a bad thing to be a mineralogist and
Right.
love minerals. But starting in the 1990s in the United States, it really became perceived as very old-fashioned, not the cutting edge of geology, not the direction to go. And what I was curious to hear your perspective on the why of that. You know, what really happened during that time in the 90s that mining in the United States really just went off the cliff?
Yeah, I think the environmental movement had a lot to do with that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it was a very useful movement, but and still is. But I think somehow they managed to change the conversation and the perspective of the public at large, much more so than in the other countries where environmental movements were as well. And I think it has to do a lot of with what you say. I mean, mining is such a, you know, when you look at it from a GDP perspective, Canada, Australia, Chile, it's 80%. So anybody in Chile, you know, the average guy on the street knows everything about mining. And I think that's one of the main differences. And then those countries also do a better job educating people around mining, having more offerings in terms of courseworks. The mining companies there are more, they do more outreach. I mean, it used to be here in the US that you could, mining companies, for instance, would invite the nearest town to go on their mining properties, you know, and climb on the haul truck and see what's going on. They can't do that anymore. The lawyers put a stop to it. In Canada and Australia, they still go. And that makes a big difference. It's not everywhere like that. In Arizona, for instance, I was on the way to a mine once, speeding in Arizona, and I got pulled over by the sheriff. And he says, "Oh, what are you doing, sir?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm a little bit late for a mining meeting." And he said, "Oh, that's great. Off you go." So you know, so there is some parts of the U.S. that understanding is there, but a large part there isn't. Yeah.
This was really interesting. Thanks, Rens. I'm curious. You were talking about the funding models and how expensive it is to build a mine. With I guess the weird exploration divide where it's pure speculation with the junior exploration companies, and once the miners take over, it's very conservative bank debt financed sort of financial structure. Are you seeing a shift with venture capital or private equity moving into this space?
Definitely.
And how is that shifting the industry in the jobs within the industry, even more importantly, maybe? Or is it not changing much?
No, it's not. It's not changing much, and it's interesting that it's going both ways. I mean, there is the critical minerals bandwagon right now, so a lot of investors are interested in that, probably not knowing much about the mining industry necessarily. And then on the other hand, of course, there's the pension funds, the Anglican Church, the Norwegian pension fund, largest pension fund in the world. They're actually pulling back from mining because they don't agree with the lack of sustainability and environmental performance. So there's an interesting dynamic going on in that regard. But overall, there's more money available right now for mining. The mining companies themselves are quite flush with money, and they're the big ones. The little ones are struggling because they're not making any money, right? They're in a very expensive country. So what they do is they try to go in, promote the project as much as they can, doing as little as possible, and then hoping that one of the big boys comes in and buys them out. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about being an environmental geochemist within the structure of a mining company, and how, if there's tension between the kind of environmental side and the profit making side, or is everybody all in, we all have the same goals? It just interested me.
I get
kind
it.
of a unique
Yeah.
perspective on
Yeah,
that.
they do all have the same goal, certainly. And I'm really impressed when I visit a mining company, and it can be anywhere in the world. They all want to do the right thing. Absolutely, they're all motivated to do that. But then reality sets in, and money is being made by production, and that means that on a day-to-day basis, production takes precedence over just about everything else in mining, and that can come at the expense of environmental monitoring, environmental management, but it can also come at the expense of other things. But so there is this. I mean, they do want to do it right, but you can only do things right when you have the money to do so. And one of the first items to be shoved under the rug is often the environment. But I wouldn't call it tension. It's just the realities of operating a mine. A mine is typically always close to its margin. So not much needs to happen before the balance goes either way. And then if you're then in a department of a mining company that does not make money, and that can be the social outreach, it can be the restaurant. I mean, they cut down on the meals or the offerings. They'll find ways to make money. And the environment, maybe you monitor 5 wells instead of 10, or you cut down your analyte suite from 40 to 5. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to make money at the expense of the environment. Yeah.
I had a question. You talked about an attractiveness potential, I think
Yeah,
is what you call it. And it had the resource and then the policy.
Yeah.
And the US did pretty well.
Very well. Yeah.
But I think that the biggest problem would be social license. And that's where the US really has a problem.
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't think social license is brought out individually in this survey. Actually, if you go to the survey itself, there are 50 or so of these charts that give you a lot more granularity than what I did. No, social license was not, that would not have been part of this particular survey. It really was the ease at which you can do business in a certain jurisdiction. And perhaps, I should correct myself, maybe a California regulator is affected by, say, the California populace, which in general is less inclined to support mining than, say, in Nevada. So maybe social license comes in through the back door, so to speak. But it's not overtly part of this survey.
Barbara Arnold, I chair the mining program here at Penn State, and I just want to say, fabulous presentation. I sort of in response to what Sue was saying, or not Sue, I think it was Maureen was asking the question about environmental. We just placed one of our environmental environmental systems engineering students as an intern at Rio Tinto this summer out at Bingham Canyon. And so, you know, that's kind of like one of the best jobs you could have right now is with Rio Tinto, with especially since they're really looking into the critical minerals in everything that they're mining. So it's she's going to have a fabulous time in the summer.
He will, yeah, absolutely. Rio
Yep.
Tinto, I think, is one of the best companies to work for. They do their own R&D. They're very large, very forward-thinking. So yeah, I'm sure
Absolutely.
that student is going to have a great time. And I don't know if it was a he or a she, but there'll be a
She?
job offer on the table.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
believe, yeah.
absolutely
In my
sure.
company, WSP, we have interns too, and we think it's great. I mean, 9 out of 10 times we end up hiring them as well after they're done with their studies. Yeah, internships of any kind are one of the best ways of finding out whether the job is for you, and for us as a company to find out whether you're the right person for the job.
Absolutely. And I mean, all of our students, if they want an
Mhm.
internship, most of them get internships. My master's student is going to work for Freeport next summer. And actually, the master's student that just graduated with me, he's actually working with WSP in New York City. He's
Oh, okay.
doing CFD work with tunnels.
I can answer the question. So Dave, this is for you. Yeah, given the risks, how does WSP select its projects? Very carefully. You know, there are certain countries where we won't work because of corruption, because of risks, physical risks to our employees, but also in terms of engineering, there are certain risks that we would not be willing to take on. This would be on a case-by-case basis, but for instance, as a hypothetical, I'm sure we would decline to build a tailings dam in certain parts of the world, maybe due to seismic instability or something like that. And we would tell the client, no, we don't believe it can be done safely. And then we say thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, we have a whole risk assessment process in place for those types of projects, and that goes all the way to the company's executives, depending on the dollar amount. Yeah.
Okay, we better wrap it up there. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rens.
Yeah.